Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let us continue with our tafsir of Surah An-Nisaa bihawlillah wa quwwatih. And we are on ayah number 35. قال الله تبارك وتعالى وإن خفتم شقاق بينهما فابعثوا حكما من أهله وحكما من أهلها إن يريدا إصلاحا يوفق الله بينهما إن الله كان عليما خبيرا. He says, if you khiftum from khafa, yakhafu khawfan, to fear, if you fear a shiqaq between them, meaning between the husband and the wife. Shiqaq here means from shiq, which means one side. So the husband is on one side and the wife is on the other side. In other words, they are opposing each other. They're not on the same page. So there is constant arguments and bickering and lack of reconciliation between them, where it is just getting out of hand and exceeding normal bounds. As for when he says, if you fear, this means to say if you deem it to be most likely that these two people have some severe differences between them. Then he says, فَبَعَثُوا, which means to send, as in to send forth someone. Send a hakaman, which means send a judge. So a judge from the family of the husband and the wife should come together and resolve the difference, because clearly the husband and the wife cannot do it by themselves. And the reason why a member of each of their household is chosen is because they are most likely to be knowledgeable about the husband and about the wife, and about matters which annoy them, which make them happy, which trigger them, and the type of person they are. Your family members are most likely to know you better than non-family members, and this information helps in resolving disputes. And these disputes are in a case where we have a grey area, where we do not know who the oppressor is or who is in the wrong. As for if we clearly know who is in the wrong, then the matter is easy to decide. But with these grey areas, it requires more of a discussion and a reconciliation, some give and take, so that we may arrive at a happy middle ground. If you cannot find anyone from their families, then you appoint the best person you believe for the job. And so these two hakamaini, these two judges, will try to reconcile between the husband and the wife by trying to arrive at a middle ground. However, if the two judges cannot arrive at a middle ground, and they feel that a separation of this marriage is the best thing for both parties, then so be it. He says, if they want islah, meaning reconciliation, then Allah will yuwaffiq Allahu baynahuma, make tawfiq between them, which means make them agree or reconcile between them. But who is being referred to here? Some have said that the husband and wife are being referred to. So if the husband and wife want peace with each other, then Allah will reconcile between them. But what is apparent from the ayah is that it refers to the two judges. That if the two judges are sincere and they are indeed working for islah, which is peace and reconciliation, then Allah will make for them a way to reconcile. And he ends by saying that Allah was ever the aliman, the knowledgeable, and the khabiran, which also means knowledgeable, but one who has knowledge about inner affairs. And alim is the one who has knowledge about outward affairs or apparent things, as opposed to the secret hidden things. Otherwise they mean basically the same thing. So reflecting on this ayah, we find the idea of appointing a judge, but this is on the condition that the judge be known to be righteous and trustworthy and knowledgeable. You obviously cannot appoint just anyone as a judge, because the matter is serious. We're speaking about the lives of people. Also, because the ayah says appoint the judge from each of their families, we take the idea that the judge needs to know the people he is judging amongst. He needs to be familiar with their nature and with their customs, and obviously the language. So having a foreign judge is often not a good idea. So we are not just talking about marriage disputes, we are talking about judgment in general. The judge needs to be familiar with the people. We also take from this ayah a refutation against the Khawarij, who say that the judgment can only be left to Allah Jalla wa Ala. In this ayah, Allah Jalla wa Ala refers the judgment to human beings and their judgment and decision. And this is certainly the case in matters of arbitration, where we do not have particular texts to go by, giving us detailed rulings. We just have general principles such as make reconciliation, make peace, and so on. We also take that the judge needs to have the correct intention. In this case, it is to make reconciliation and to make peace and to rectify the affair. So your intention matters. Which foot you get off on actually matters, because that's the way you will continue. As for a corrupt intention, your judgments will continue as corrupt judgments. We also notice something interesting in this ayah. Allah talks about if they want to make peace, then Allah will reconcile between them. But He does not talk about if the judges decide to separate between the husband and wife. Now, why would He do that? He is subtly indicating here that what you should be aiming for is islah, not tafriq, which is a separation. So clearly we see that this ayah is biased towards islah, because this is better for everyone, especially if there are children in the marriage. Children need both parents to stay together. This is more beneficial for their upbringing. We also realize that ultimately it is Allah Jalla wa Ala who will reconcile between the husband and the wife, because the matter is solely in His affair, of course, because He is the Rabb. We also take, because Allah Jalla wa Ala calls them Hakam, it means that their decision is binding. Because if it is not binding, and we can just simply ignore their decision, then what is the point in calling them Hakam? So if they decide that the husband and the wife cannot stay together, this marriage is not working, there's no middle ground that can be reached, then they have the right to separate between the husband and the wife, if they both agree to this matter. So either they will tell the husband to issue the divorce, and if the husband does so, that is all well and good. Otherwise, they can simply dissolve the marriage as it is, because in keeping them married, this will be harmful to either both parties or one of the parties. And of course, we always avoid the harm, la darar wa la dirar, which is to say that the harm must be removed, whether this harm happens unintentionally or intentionally. And we also learn of the two names of Allah Jalla wa Ala, Alim and Khabir, and we spoke about the difference between the two. So all in all, looking at this ayah and the previous ayah, when you have some friction between the husband and the wife, we have 4 stages which are mentioned. Number 1, it is that the husband admonishes the wife if she is guilty of nushuz. Number 2, he separates in the bedding. Number 3, he issues a disciplinary hitting. And number 4, if the previous steps do not work, we have the 2 hakamani situation. Notice about the disciplinary hitting, however, many of the times we need to look at the ahkam shar'iyya in the light of the law of the land you're living in. So the sharia gives the permissibility of issuing a disciplinary hitting. It also speaks about qisas, life for a life, eye for an eye, nose for a nose, ear for an ear, tooth for a tooth, and so on. It talks about the had punishments. But all of this cannot be implemented unless the law of the land allows it, because these are matters in which the law of the land interferes with. These are not just personal matters. So just because a husband reads that in the ayah of Surah An-Nisaa it allows the husband to issue a disciplinary hitting to the wife, that does not mean that he absolutely must carry it out. Rather, he needs to look at the law of the land. If the law of the land says that this is a criminal act and you could get in trouble with the law, then obviously do the sensible thing and avoid such a thing. And it's not like hitting the wife is wajib, so you must do it. It is merely permissible. The permission is given. It's the same thing with polygyny, multiple wives. It is permissible. But what if the law of the land disallows it? Then you avoid it, because it's not like it is wajib to do, as opposed to the salah. If the law of the land says you're not allowed to perform the salah, this is a law that must be opposed, even if it is done secretly. Why? Because the salah is wajib, and it is a right of Allah Jalla wa Ala. Ayah number 36. وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إحسانا وبذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين والجار ذي القربى والجار الجنب والصاحب بالجنب وابن السبيل وما ملكت أيمانكم إن الله لا يحب من كان مختالا فخورا. This ayah is known by many scholars as the Ayatul Huquq, the ayah of rights, because it speaks about rights of 10 categories. The first right which he speaks about, and fairly obviously, is make ibadah of Allah and do not commit shirk with Him. So ibadah is a key term. We have spoken about Allah is a key term. Shirk is a key term. It simply means sharing. And shirk in Allah Jalla wa Ala would be when you share or you put something else on the same status as Allah with regards to the Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah and Asma wa Sifat of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And Tawheed is the opposite, is when you declare Allah to be one and unique in His Rububiyyah, Uluhiyyah and Asma wa Sifat. And this includes all types of shirk, whether it is major shirk or minor shirk, open shirk or hidden shirk like Riya, which is showing off. And secondly he says وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and to do ihsan, which is to do good. So hasan means good, to do good to the walidain, which are the parents. So they are next in line. After the rights of Allah are the rights of the parents. But what does it mean to do good to the parents? Because the ayah does not give any details, we say that anything which is considered good in the customs of the people is considered good by Allah Jalla wa Ala, as long as it does not oppose any particular text of the Sharia. So it would be things like being in their service, helping them out, obeying them in permissible matters. The way you speak to them and the way you conduct yourself in front of them needs to be with honor and dignity and humility. Okay, what about if your parents annoy you or anger you? Then it is to be patient on their harms, but not to reciprocate their harms by harming them back. And then he says, وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى, the meaning owner of, qurba meaning nearness, so this means your relatives. And it matters not whether they are related from the father's side or the mother's side, they are your family members. So we are ordered likewise to do good to our family relatives. But of course your level of ihsan to your relatives will not reach the same high level of ihsan to your parents, because your parents obviously have more rights over you than other family members. Then he says, وَالْيَتَامَى, we have spoken about this word, the plural of yatim. They of course are a vulnerable group, and the more vulnerable a group is, the more we are ordered to look after them. Then he says, وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, another vulnerable group. We have spoken about these people. Then he says, وَالْجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى, this is the 6th category in total. This is the jar, which is the neighbor. So that is the person who simply lives in your neighborhood. Does not have to be a next door neighbor, just simply in the neighborhood. So it could be somebody living on the same street as yours. Dhil qurba, meaning relative. So it's your neighbor who is also a relative of yours. So such a person has 2 rights, one as a neighbor and the other as a relative. And in those days, they had close-knit communities where people were living close by to each other. So relatives would be living in close proximity to each other. Even though nowadays in most places this is not the case. People are spread out much more. And then he says, وَالْجَارِ الْجُنُبِ, this simply means the neighbor who is not a relative of yours. There is a second tafsir to all of this. They say that the al-jar dhil qurba is the one who lives near you, and the jar al-junub is the one who lives further away, regardless of whether they're related to you or not. So that was the 7th category. Then we have the 8th category, was sahib bil-jamb. Sahib, the companion, bil-jamb, by the side. The companion by the side. So this is the person who is keeping companionship with you. So it can include your spouse. It can include your work colleague. It can include your traveling companion. So these are the people whom you keep company with. So they have the right over you, that you do good to them. Then he says, وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ, and the wayfarer. So this is the person who is on a journey and he passes by you, maybe he stops by at your place. Such a person has a right that you do good to them. And finally, the 10th category, وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ, what your right hands possess. This simply means your servants. And he ends by saying that Allah does not love the mukhtal, so this means the proud person, and fakhuran means the boastful person, the one who essentially blows his own trumpet, as it were. Now the question is, why would Allah end in such a way that He does not love the mukhtal and fakhura? And the reason is, it is only the mukhtal and the fakhur who is not going to give the aforementioned 10 categories their due rights and will not treat them well, because such a person is too proud to lower himself or herself and to treat others well. Okay, so reflecting on this ayah, what do we take? The obligation of ibadah of Allah and the prohibition of shirk, fairly obviously. We take that your parents have most rights over you out of all the human beings after Allah and His Messenger. And if we are ordered to do good to the parents and all these other categories, then it also means that we are prohibited from doing bad to them. You just have to flip the coin over. And so that's the antithesis of this ayah. It is haram to do bad to these aforementioned categories. So bad would be the way you conduct yourself, the way you speak, the way you behave physically. It is broad and largely defined by customs, as we mentioned before. We learn of the obligation of ihsan to your relatives, and the closer somebody is related to you, the more rights they have that you do good to them, even if they do bad to you. So do not reciprocate their evil with your evil to them, because family relations are different to non-family relations, where we can say that the reward of an evil is an evil. We learn of the great rights of the neighbors. Notice he mentions neighbors twice, one who is a relative of yours and the other one who is not a relative of yours. So neighbors can be of different types. If a neighbor is a Muslim, he has a right of Islam as well, as opposed to a kafir neighbor. In any case, neighbors have great rights, and there are many narrations about this, such as one where the Prophet ﷺ authentically asked his companions, مَا تَقُولُونَ فِي الزِّنَا, what do you say about fornication? And they said it is haram. Allah and the Messenger made it haram, therefore it is haram up till Yawm al-Qiyamah. And the Prophet replied, لَأَنْ يَزْنِيَ الرَّجُلُ بِعَشَّرِ نِسْوَةٍ أَيْسَرُ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَنْ يَزْنِيَ بِامْرَأَةِ جَارِهِ. That a man should fornicate with 10 women is more trivial than him fornicating with the wife of his neighbor. Then he asked the companions, مَا تَقُولُونَ فِي السَّرِقَةِ, what do you say about stealing? They said it is haram. Allah and the Messenger have made it haram. And the Prophet replied, لَأَنْ يَسْرِقَ الرَّجُلُ مِنْ عَشَرَةِ أَبْيَاتٍ أَيْسَرُ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَنْ يَسْرِقَ مِنْ جَارِهِ. That a man should steal from 10 houses is still more trivial than stealing from the house of his neighbor. We also learn of the rights of the orphans and the wayfarer, because these are vulnerable groups. When a person is traveling, he is vulnerable because he is outside of his comfort zone. As for the yatim, it is obvious that they are vulnerable. And also the masakin, likewise, they're vulnerable groups. We are ordered much more to do good to them. We learn that we are also ordered to do good with our colleagues, the sahib bil-jamb, whether this is a spouse or whether it is a school colleague or a work colleague or a traveling companion. All of these are companions of yours because they are sticking by your side, and therefore they have rights which must be respected. And we also find that there are certain types of people that Allah does not love, the proud and the boastful being amongst them, which would then mean there are certain types of people that Allah does love. So love is from His attributes. We also find that being prideful and boastful is not only just an evil characteristic in and of itself, but that it will prevent you from enacting righteous deeds, such as spoken of in this ayah, which is to give rights to certain types of people. Only if you have humility will you give rights to those who are due it. هذا والله أعلم.